Good morning. On this Tuesday morning, we're going to jump in here, get started just as quickly as Facebook starts to gather from that notification that was supposed to go out. I guess everybody got that. Hopefully you did. We've had serious issues for the last 2 years with Facebook not sharing this with my audience. And I don't know why. We've gone from somewhere in the neighborhood of 350 views to 400 views of Facebook videos to next to nothing. And that isn't going to change. I'm going to continue to do what I do. I'm going to share it here. I'm going to share it on YouTube. At this point in my life, don't really care. I only care about one thing, and that is making sure that I give some clarity as we go. That's all I really want to do. I want to be a voice of clarity in a confused world. So that's what we're focusing on. Good morning, Tom. It's good to see you. Let's connect when you get a chance. You've been heavy on my mind the last couple of days. So check in with me. If not, if my phone's still not dead, I'll send you a text message in just a minute. Okay. All right. I want to talk about 3 things today and I want to clean up a little bit from yesterday. I think that there was a little bit of confusion when I used the word nostalgia. I wasn't talking about how great and wonderful things have always been for everybody. I don't believe that. In fact, and I'm going to tiptoe into this one really carefully. I've been greatly concerned about and you will never see me promoting or supporting this. Been greatly concerned about that statement, "Make America Great Again," because the again hasn't been true for everybody, and I understand that. I lived through a bunch of that, and I know that. That doesn't change where I come from. It doesn't change my perspective. But what it does do is it makes me aware of the fact that a lot of people make decisions based upon nostalgia. And they have a loyalty to a party who they thought was loyal to them, only to find out that somewhere, and that's the reason why I used the walk away yesterday, is because I've watched so many people go through this walk away process. And what they have discovered is that I'm going to take my glasses off because I've got a bad reflection this morning. What they have discovered is that in the process of this, they are they're discovering that what they thought represented them and supported them really was exactly the opposite of that. I talked about tents getting big and tents getting little yesterday, and how that some of the tents that we used to think were really big aren't really big anymore. And the story that I'm hearing repeatedly from the people in the walkaway community are that I used to think that this was going to be loving, warm, and tolerant. It's not. No longer are they loving, warm, and tolerant. I have to think like this, and I have to think like that. Well, welcome to reality. Things have changed. And because things have changed, and they've changed in a serious fashion, because things have changed, we have to be aware of the fact that loyalty to some organization, whatever it might be, a loyalty to that, whatever that organization might be, that creates serious confusion. And that's where the walkaway people come from. It's created a mental confusion for them. I thought that this is what that was, but I found out that that's not what it is at all. Now, I made it very clear yesterday that I walked away from the Republican Party 12 years ago. And I gave you the reasons why I walked away from it. I don't want to get into that again, but I did. I walked away from that. So I understand that feeling. That no longer represented me. That no longer was part of my interest. And then I realized something that was really important, and that was that my vote was the most valuable thing that I had. And when I made it clear that I was going to vote for a third-party candidate, I was attacked by both sides. That I was wasting my vote. No, it's my vote. I'll do with that vote what I choose to do. And I realized how powerful that vote really is. Because when you get attacked by both the left and the right, by both Republican and Democrat, because you choose to do something different with your vote, guess how important that vote becomes? Do you understand what I'm saying? That's what I was talking about breaking the nostalgia. That that vote, I had to make some decisions, and yes, it did not go over well with anyone, because that vote apparently was pretty important. Okay, now you say, but your candidate didn't win. That was not the point. The point was, what am I going to do with that vote? And how well am I going to be able to sleep at night? And that was my point entirely. I'm really struggling to see your comments. That's the reason why I kind of bought back and forth. Yeah, I totally agree, Don, and that's what's being discovered by the people who are in this walk away or community. I'm going to call it a community because it's not necessarily an organization, but it is a community, and it was a community that recognized that there's not as much tolerance as they thought there was. And I've followed people who've made that transition. Because I want to have a big tent, so I want people inside of. I want to be hearing from, and I want inside of that community with differing and opposing views. And I've watched people with differing and opposing views move, because once they started to do the research, once they started to look at the information and the facts, they've moved. And oftentimes where they go, and the place where they landed, because it made more sense, was this whole walk away community, which is huge, by the way. And it's been attacked by both sides, which isn't beneficial. It doesn't help, but more attacked than anything else by the left. Because how dare you leave? You're not allowed to leave. We're entitled to your vote. Think that vote's not important? That's why the vote becomes so important. So a little clarification about the nostalgia. I didn't want that to be confusing. I've actually very publicly talked about, when you're talking about, again, which part of America were you talking about? Were you talking about the 60s? Because I remember that. I actually lived through that period of time. I remember all the stuff that went on during that time period. Were you talking about the 70s? Because I remember about Kent State, and I remember about all of those things that took place. I do remember that stuff. And so I was never really sure about that, again, because it was confusing to me. It didn't make sense. And that bothers me. Okay, and it's created some identity politics and some identification issues that aren't beneficial to anybody, and avoids the importance of policy. That was the most important thing. Second thing is, I want to talk about this, because this one's kind of important. I made a comment about a week ago, when after the debate, where Joe Biden had referred to President Bush. See, I'm as bad as I'm going to talk about gaffes, and I make a major gaffe. Talked about President Trump, and how that, and called him Abraham Lincoln. That's a gaffe. See, we all do them. That's a classic example. I just did one. We all do gaffes. They happen. And man, I was like, you don't understand. You don't understand the context of that. No, I understood the context of it completely. And it's so important that you understand. Don't attack me for that. I thought it was funny. I really thought it was funny. Listen, I've made gazillions of public presentations, never on platform like those people do. Make sure you understand that. But speaking to an enormous, and this is an all-time Eric classic gaffe, because I make them bad. I'm really bad about them. And if somebody were following me around with a camera and just capturing my gaffes, you'd think I didn't have any clue what I was talking about. But once speaking to a very large group of people on Easter Sunday, I wanted to talk about the resurrection, and I used the story of Jonah. And I said, as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale. Major gaffe. There's a difference between a belly of a whale and the belly of a whale. But if I'm going to be evaluated based upon the gaffe, you're going to go, that clown doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. But I did. And that's just real, okay? We make gaffes. There's a difference between a gaffe and something that's not true. There's a difference between those two. There's a difference between a gaffe and a policy position. There's a difference between a gaffe that indicates that you just weird stuff came out of your mouth. And every time I watch the stuff that's going on, I'm reminded, and I'm going to cloak this statement on purpose, okay? And I'm cloaking this statement on purpose because you could figure out who I'm talking about, and I don't want you to. Some of you could figure out who I'm talking about, and I don't want you to. This is how I'm going to cloak this statement. And the way I'm going to cloak this statement is I had an office. That's great, Jeffrey. As a matter of fact, Jeffrey was probably there the day I said Welly of the Bail, but he might have been asleep. I won't tell you that. He might have been. But here's the point I want to make. I used to have an office in a small town in Kansas. There was a man who had spent some time in the Kansas State House, Kansas, and very, very popular, very well known, came from a completely different political perspective than I do, or that I ever have. And thank you. I'm glad you got that, Jeffrey. But he started to struggle with dementia. And I discovered that he would walk from the facility where he lived, he would walk down the street and come into this little cafe. And I met him in there one day. And so we started meeting there every day for lunch. It was fun. We enjoyed the same meal, and I would sit and talk to him for hours. There was once a time when I talked to him and he drove me nuts because I said yesterday I was a lobbyist for the Eastern Kansas Gas and Oil Association. Guess who I had to talk to? And guess who was sponsoring the bill that I was trying to oppose? It was him. But we would sit down, we'd have lunch together, we would talk together, we would have a great time, and he had no clue what was going on. He could get his lunch order out, he could have a decent conversation, but it was really spotty. And when it was time to leave, I would get up and walk to the door with him, and I would have to point him in the direction that he had come from to make sure he got back to where he was supposed to go. Every time I hear one of our presidential candidates today, I hear that same conversation. I hear the same conversation. And I don't say that about this man because it was somebody that I differed with. It was actually somebody I greatly enjoyed his company. I enjoyed our time together. I spent a long time ago, but I want you to understand that sometimes people make gaffes. That's one thing. Sometimes the gaffes are an indication of something else. If a while ago when I said President Bush, you thought that was a gaffe and I was losing my mind, you might be right, but I don't think so. I don't think so. I think I'm still playing with all my full deck. It was just a gaffe. And it never fails whenever I'm going to talk about gaffe. I'm great at creating one, okay? That leads me to the third thing, and that is that being able to talk on a stream of consciousness is extremely important. And what that means is this. You ask a question, I take that question and I go somewhere with it. I don't create a word salad. I go somewhere with it. I have connected with the question and I begin to take it in a direction. This is the reason why I lose my mind when I think somebody's reading notes. When you've got to show up with notes as to what you're going to do, then I question your ability to be able to handle the situation. The stream of consciousness is extremely important from a leadership standpoint. You ask a question, I see a situation, I pick up that right there and I go somewhere with it. That's a stream of consciousness. If I can't connect into that stream of consciousness, if I have to have notes, then I'm not capable of being able to provide leadership in the right situations. Does that make sense? That's a concern. And for people who say, I would rather have that than this. They're missing the most important element of leadership, and that's the ability to think on the fly. Yes, sometimes the information that's given will be partially correct or disjointed a little bit, and it needs to be cleaned up. Yesterday, somebody asked me about where did I get the information from the DHS and the 485 children whose parents said, no, don't send them back. I don't want them. Who would do that? Well, I can tell you, people do it. And they did. And so I was able to give the documentation for that, although I couldn't have given it to you off the top of my head. I couldn't have told you where that came from. I know it came from my research that I did on it, but I didn't have the ability to be able to recall immediately that. But I did have enough facts for the facts to make sense. Understand what I'm talking about here, the importance of the stream of consciousness? Yeah, Don's nailed it. When you need to have no, and if you're a spokesperson, that's okay. But there's a reason why the spokesperson is a spokesperson, not the leader. Tom says being able to think on the fly and make decisions. That's it. We have to be able to connect and make decisions. And when you're negotiating with other leaders, then you have to be able to recall the correct information. You have to have the right position and perspective, and you need to be able to tap into that stream of consciousness, or you become lunch. And giving a word salad is not going to be beneficial. I'll talk about a word salad at another time, because it's something that I used to tell my students all the time. Don't give me fluff. That was my definition of a word salad. Don't just put a bunch of words in that don't make sense. Instead, give me something that is connected, and those thoughts are connected together. And there are a lot of things that we do, and public speakers are cursed with it. If you want to avoid a question, what you do is you say, well, the fact of the matter is, and it's perfectly clear that, and what we have to do in order to, and what you've done is created a word salad, instead of answering the question and being able to make a decision. All right, I'm going to wrap that up with those three things today. Hopefully that'll clarify some things that I had shared yesterday. I want to make sure that I was clear about that. And if you all didn't get a chance to see that, go back and look at yesterday's video, not necessarily the video, but the exchange between a friend of mine and I. That's how that's supposed to take place. That's how that's supposed to happen. And that's how great things get accomplished. All right. Thank you for joining me today. I probably will not be live tomorrow. I am going to take a short trip tomorrow, and I may be gone during the time to be live. So just so you know that, and I will be on the road, and I will look forward to talking to you Thursday morning. I promise.